So we have some breaking news out of Wisconsin regarding the Democratic primary. It appears that Wisconsin Governor Tony Everts has postponed the election until June 9th. So that's actually a very positive development. And of course, he did so because of concerns about the coronavirus, specifically in the fact that they did not have the right kind of infrastructure to do all mail voting. So that's very important. So now let me read you an article from The Hill. Everts, just minutes after Everts issued the order, Senate Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald and Assembly Speaker Robin Voss issued a joint statement indicating they will challenge the directive in Wisconsin State Supreme Court. So these are the Republicans who were against this. So understand that Everts, Democrat, and the Democratic Party in Wisconsin said, okay, we should postpone this, right? We should make sure that we get as many voters as we can out there, but only when it's safe, right? And unfortunately, right now, it's not safe. And we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the poll workers. We don't have, the polling stations set up. In fact, in Milwaukee, there's normally about 180 polling stations. They shut down to about 5. Ridiculousness. So that's obviously not enough. Milwaukee has a population of about 600,000 people. And so all those people, I mean, obviously not all those people, but a majority of those people crammed into 5 polling stations in the middle of a pandemic, it's not going to cut it. So it's a good decision by Tony Evers. So now there's a lot of drama leading up to this. Again, you have Republicans that are saying, no, let's keep the election. Let's go. Let's have the election happen. And if people get sick, they get sick. If they die, they die. Right? I mean, yes, they didn't say that specifically, but that's the general intent. Like, let's continue to have this election, right? Let's do this. And again, I don't care what happens to regular people. And so not only that, but there were court challenges to this, to holding this primary, all that stuff. So I'm glad he used the power of the executive order. But again, we're going to see a challenge. But the primary was supposed to be tomorrow. You have a court challenge. That's going to take a while. That actually also was very helpful because with this, you end up having to delay this, unless, of course, there's a stay. But we'll see what happens, right? So now, look, there were a lot of reasons why they should they should not hold this primary tomorrow, right? And so part of the original story that I was going to talk about is where basically the Democratic Party, Bernie Sanders, the Wisconsin Democratic Party, Bernie Sanders, and mayors throughout the state, civil rights groups, were saying we should absolutely delay this election because you would have a problem with in-person voting. Having an election in the middle of a pandemic is ridiculous. Now, Republicans, again, were calling for this, but also Joe Biden. In fact, Biden had joined Republicans in urging the state to move ahead with the election as planned, saying that it's a matter for the Wisconsin courts and folks to decide. But wait a minute, Joe, if you were any kind of a leader, you would say, actually, no, I agree with my friend Bernie Sanders. We should postpone this until it's actually safe for people to go out. No leadership on the part of Joe Biden. I mean, he's literally calling for supporters to go out and get sick, and not calling for the postponing of this election. Look, I guess Joe Biden joined Republicans because he kind of is one. But here's the thing. Here's the political part of this, right? And I know I can't believe you're politicizing the pandemic. No. Here's the thing. It was politicized long before by anybody who, people in the DNC and anybody who wants to basically stop the candidacy of Bernie Sanders. I mean, people will die, right? If this happens. And thankfully, it's not going to. But calling that out, I mean, if you call that out, you're a Bernie bro, right? Thing is, it was the experts that were calling for this. James Conway, an infectious disease expert at the University of Wisconsin, said the state's plan to go ahead with the in-person voting was really irresponsible. It just seems really irresponsible to make this one giant exception to social distancing. Conway told the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, from a public health stand, it's both the wrong message and it's taking an enormous gamble, and also would have been a complete mess, as I mentioned before. All the poll workers, they had a massive shortage of that. And they had, of course, only 5 polling stations in Milwaukee instead of 180. And so along with this massive issue of spreading around this disease, you also disenfranchise people. It's in a way, it's a form of voter suppression. Now, the Republicans, of course, the reason I'm not really complaining about them too much is because we already know where Republicans stand. The less people that show up, the more they tend to win elections. So they don't care about people. They don't care about their voters. And so they're basically disposable, throwaway. Hey, as long as I remain in power, that's all I care about. And when less people show up, I happen to win. But for Biden, I mean, I don't understand why Biden wouldn't become a leader on this. Why? I mean, you just want to avoid, you just wanted to avoid being a leader on this issue. Is it because you think that Bernie Sanders would have an advantage? I mean, maybe he was afraid that Bernie Sanders would have an advantage. I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and all of his policy positions seems to have been proven to be the right thing to do. And maybe he's afraid that people would wake up to it and think, oh, I did lose my employer-sponsored healthcare. Medicare for all sounds pretty good right now. Even so, I mean, you look at the polls in Wisconsin, they were not headed towards Bernie Sanders. And in fact, voting right now would do more to put Bernie Sanders to bed. And maybe that's why the DNC and Biden himself were pushing forward with this. And now the other thing is Bernie Sanders was getting blamed for people for this, people turning out to vote. Thankfully, they don't have to until June 9th now. But if they had gone along with this and people had gotten sick, they would have, of course, blamed Bernie Sanders for not dropping out. And so, again, there are layers of political just ridiculousness in this. And so, I mean, what do you expect, right? You got to wonder, if you're Joe Biden, why put your voters so much at risk in order to make a quick end to Bernie Sanders? I don't know. I tell you, though, if this had gone forward, I would have called this an illegitimate election, because that's what it would have been. Even if Bernie had won, illegitimate election. Don't. Any primary held in the middle of a pandemic where 100% of ballots are not counted, illegitimate. Clearly. The utter callousness of Republicans and the DNC and Joe Biden for trying to encourage in-person voting is gross. Not at all representative democracy. And so it would have absolutely 100% have been illegitimate. And thankfully, Evers did the right thing and put a stop to it. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a patreon.com/TYTNation set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.